happens at a very strategic point, because what's coming is the Protestant overthrow of much of the hegemony of Western Europe. But the Catholicism that escaped to Spain and to New France is still the old world Catholicism. And even when the political revolutions come, particularly with Napoleon, and whether the Protestants already disrupted the political order of the Catholic happy relationship with the state, but then the political order became to be unglued. And so all this turmoil was happening in Europe, while in America we had a much bigger, much stronger piece of things without all of that confusion. Those revolutions eventually were transported throughout all of Europe thanks to Napoleon, no thanks to Napoleon. Garibaldi and Victor Emmanuel in Italy, Bismarck in Germany, Bolivar in South America. They were overthrowing the old happy relationship that existed between the church and state. But the people who settled in Louisiana, it's my contention, and I hinted at it when the Paynes were here, were spared that, I think, by God's design. So America holds a special place in preserving Catholicism, even though officially we're sort of a Protestant country, sort of. And yet Catholic in thinking. We have the oldest constitution in the world, 250 years, something like that, which is rooted in natural law. No other country in the world has that. But I've heard it said that Louisiana is the heart of the United States. And what's special about Louisiana is that the people who came here, like my ancestors, Patou, Longlenay, Huval, and Louviere, they all came from France. And they left before the French Revolution. And so they were not infected with these Republican, not Republican Democrat, Republican ideas of a separation of church and state that was hard. And the ones in Canada who were kicked out. Now you may not know this, but the British did not kick the French out of Canada to Louisiana. They settled them along the New England coast and sent many of them back to France. At the time this was happening, France had been ceded to the Spanish. And for about 40 years, when all this was happening, Louisiana was a Spanish possession. And the Spanish went to France to recruit Catholics because Spain was getting along with France, and they were Catholic. And so they were both hated the British. In fact, I have a story to tell in just a little bit, but they both hated the British because of the Protestant persecution of the Catholics. So the French and the Spanish were sticking together. There's so much to be said about that. But the Spanish invited these displaced Frenchmen, Canadians, to Louisiana. And that's really where we came from, the people in this area. So you had the influence of France, the people who fled there before the revolution, and you had the influence of the same Catholic Western Europe medieval civilization. They took that torch with them to this world, and they preserved it. They, at the invitation of the Spanish, and they settled right in this area from Baton Rouge on the river to really this area, within 20, 30 miles of where we sit right now. Even the Marquis de Lafayette plays a significant role, the town that we live in that bears his name. The American Revolution would very likely not have been successful without not only French help, but his help in particular. he looked to George Washington like a father, and George Washington considered him a son. And he risked a whole lot because the Lafayette was a bridge between the aristocrats. He himself was a very wealthy aristocrat who pledged millions of his own money to help the United States, because he saw the United States as a natural development of Christian civilization, and yet he was trying to limit the power of the kings, but he did not like the absolute totalitarian tendencies of the rebels either, of the Republicans. And so he was trying to help both sides. So even in the name of the town that we live in has a very important bridge figure in this whole world. So just a quick story about the skirmishes and the struggles in Canada. There were hundreds of them, where the French there, the people who lived in Acadia, Nova Scotia, who lost possession when Canada was turned over to the British began to persecute and insist that they swear unconditional allegiance to the King of England, including his regarding him as the head of the church. They refused on religious reasons. All historians will say that. Yeah, there were some political motivations, but 90% of it is they would not give up their Catholic faith. Such a swearing of an oath would betray their Catholic faith. So they refused and were kicked out by the British and went through tremendous, lost their homes, lost their money, lost their property. That's why everybody who came here was poor, very poor, and that's why we ended up with mostly swampland, is because people weren't already here. The skirmishes in Canada were led by a layman and a priest. Two priests, as a matter of fact, one following upon the other. Father Le Loutre, in fact, if you want to look up Father Le Loutre's war. He's got a whole 20 or 30 battles he fought. He led the Frenchmen against them. He called the English those English devils. Sorry. And because they were within 100 years of the persecution, of the terrible persecution of Catholics in England, but they fought, finally they lost, and that's why, and they were all eventually kicked out. The other fellow is a name, Joseph Broussard, who his nickname was Beausoleil. That's where the band comes from, Beausoleil, and his beautiful son. And he did everything in his power to help the Cajuns to resettle, to find them land. They went down to Santo Domingo, I think. It was too bad there, and that's why he led about 200 to this place. So he's a very important figure to how we got here. So this torch has been passed to us. Now the reason I don't say it's been passed to all of America, because all of America does have a Protestant idea, but big America has been the protector now for the last 100 years of Louisiana. I'm not going to get into the rightness or the wrongness of the Civil War, the war between the states, what would have happened if things had gone differently. But the bottom line is that America was a very benevolent place for religious liberty. When the Ursulines were in New Orleans, I saw the letter with my own eyes. You can go there and read it yourself in New Orleans at the Ursuline Convent, where the statue of Our Lady of Prompt Succor is. There's a letter that the Ursulines wrote to Thomas Jefferson, worried because when they came here at the Spanish request, some of them were willing to go to Cuba, which was under Spanish possession. And then when it was ceded back to the French, they thought, well, we're still in good hands. Then Napoleon sold it to the Americans, and they knew well that the Americans were descended from the British, under whom they had suffered so much. And they wrote a letter, and Thomas Jefferson wrote this letter to her and says, no, look, we're glad you're here. We're not going to hassle you. This is a new day, a new time, a new place, and you are protected by our way of government here, and they've proven largely true to that promise. And so America as a whole is sort of the stadium in which Louisiana, and particularly South Louisiana, and particularly this 20-mile radius, has received a torch and has been guarding it. You know, not every battle is an advance to victory, to victory, to victory. And MacArthur had to leave the Philippines. And, you know, St. Joseph, when Herod revealed by way of the angel to Joseph in a dream, Herod has designs, wants to kill the child. The angel could have killed Herod. The angel could have wiped out the whole army. The angel could have protected him. The reason I started talking about Jesus is going to heal things from the inside out, working with the nature that he gave to people, this very, very, very long and slow transformation of the ancient world. Jesus is not going to work magic. He's not going to sprinkle holy water and change everything overnight. Joseph himself had to get up in the middle of the night, thanks be to God, good, holy St. Joseph, and flee with the child Jesus. And so sometimes the cause of Christ has to be preserved, has to go into hiding, into seclusion, so that you can live to fight another day. And I really believe that's what happened in this. As I asked the question when the Paines were here, where in the whole world does the best of Catholic medieval Europe survive? It's not Europe. Europe has been totally racked by not just one revolution, but 5, 10 revolutions. South America, it's not in Africa, it's not in Arabia, not yet in Asia, it's not in the United States. It's not even, hate to pick on, it's not New Orleans. New Orleans has too much influence from too many other people. It's too cosmopolitan. Baton Rouge and Lake Charles, where I grew up in Sulphur, Lake Charles, one friend of mine called Sulphur that little Texas town. It's too close to Texas, and there were many people that came over from Texas, and many people that came over from Oklahoma to work in the refineries. Same thing with Baton Rouge. Big influence of people from Texas and the refineries. So it's this town, and 20 miles surrounding, 100 little towns around it, that has preserved, and the people of this town don't even know it. You stand outside a post office and say, hey, what's special about Louisiana? They say gumbo, shrimp, you know, everything. But are they aware of the tremendous struggles of the people who have caused us to be where we are, suffered for the faith? I'm afraid most of them are not, and yet it's still in their blood. Polite courtesy, love of family, all the things that come naturally to them, and yet they're unaware of this history. Now, where does John Paul the Great fit into all this? The most important thing that we can do as a people is to pass along not just the information of the faith. Christianity, Catholicism is not an ideology where we're just transmitting data. We're transmitting data infused with love. And this has to be set by example. And you have to, nevertheless, teach the Catholic faith to your children. I love the Catholic school system. This area is blessed with many good Catholic schools. And yet, in none of those schools are they going to learn hardly any of the history I just shared with you. The Catholic history. Too allied with the Chancery, who buys into the publishers, who get influenced by the big publishers, who convey really the Protestant version of history, the secular version of history. The Catholic version of history is decidedly true and shows forth the church in its glory. Even with the warts and wrinkles, it still tells the truth about the achievement. Started by saying the ancient world was a cruel and dark place of totalitarian rulers and the subjugation of women, and vice, homosexuality, promiscuity, human sacrifice, slavery. Well, under the influence of Catholicism, over about a 700-year period, guess what disappeared? Not overnight. Slavery, the biggest one of all, disappeared. It came back later as countries were already moving away from their Christian heritage. Slavery disappeared. For the first time in history, marriage was enforced between one man, one woman. In Catholic countries, there was no place you could get a divorce. Annulement's a separate topic, and a legitimately separate topic. It wasn't until the Protestants came and the unity of Christianity was disrupted that all of a sudden these ills started coming back. Divorce and remarriage immediately in all the Protestant lands where they took control. Catholicism had successfully enforced. Why? Because Jesus said so. Jesus said, Moses said, but I say. And he could finally, and his church could finally enforce the dignity of women and the limiting of the man's appetite because of the sacraments, because of the power of the sacraments and the clear teaching and the explanation of why this was important. And so the status, the feminists hate Pope. Well, he's your best friend. Everything that's beautiful about Western civilization, you can lay straight at the feet, directly at the feet of the popes, who, under the influence of the Holy Spirit, the teaching of Jesus, the example of Jesus, chivalry, the great gift of France to the world, where people would dedicate their whole lives, not even take a wife, but train for war to protect pilgrims going to the Holy Land. It's a uniquely Western Catholic thing. And they did it because of the example of the Son of God, who gave everything and got nothing in return. Why do women love Jesus more than men generally? I think because they looked at Jesus on the cross and they say, that's the only man who ever loved me and never expected me to do anything for him. He loved me selflessly. And women are conquered by that kind of love. So this example of chivalry was totally rooted in Jesus Christ. To live to help the helpless and the defenseless and the widow and the orphan. So this elevation of society is totally a result of the civilization that blossomed under the leadership of the popes and the churches, thanks to Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. The emergence, this is the biggest one, not just beauty, the arts, literature, music, if I said that, science. It's a historical fact that science was not just born, it wasn't born in the East, even in the Christian lands. Wasn't born in Arabia, wasn't born in Africa. After World War I, they were still living a life of nomads. Had no science. The secularists will try to tell you they had science. Whatever they got when they overran the Christian libraries in Alexandria in North Africa. Science emerged exclusively in Western Europe. In fact, I'm going to have just a few more minutes. I want to read this. You can put this on my tombstone if you want. This is my favorite pope. Everybody's entitled to have a favorite pope. Okay, I know John Paul the Great, I love him, great guy. But there have been other great popes too. My favorite is Leo the 13th. He's the first pope to write encyclicals on social justice, on social order, on against Freemasonry, communism, socialism. You should read them. I've read all of them. They're fantastic. He wrote quite a few, about 20. This is in his encyclical Immortali Dei on the Christian constitution of the states, addressing the issue of the obligation of the states to the peaceable order of things. And I'll close with this because it tells, I think, what the treasure we have in our possession. And in a sense, he's talking about us, because where is the Renaissance? Where is the Reconquista going to occur except from a place that still has not just the data, but the lived data? That as I look around the world, there's no other place that has it. Where will we likely be passing the torch to after this period of seclusion, which may last for a while longer? Could be Africa. They're real. Look at what the African bishops are saying right now to the Europeans who are willing to embrace in one way, shape, or form homosexuality and these other. These African bishops are standing up against them with tremendous amount of courage. Cardinal Sarah, watch him. This is paragraph number 21. There once was a time when states were governed by the philosophy of the gospel. Then it was that the power and divine virtue of Christian wisdom had diffused itself throughout the laws, institutions, and morals of the people, permeating all ranks and relations of civil society. Then, too, the religion established by Jesus Christ, established firmly in befitting dignity, flourished everywhere by the favor of princes and the legitimate protection of magistrates. And church and state were happily united in concord and friendly interchange of good offices. The state, constituted in this wise, bore fruits important beyond all expectation, whose remembrance is still and always be in renown, witnessed to as they are by countless proofs which can never be blotted out or ever obscured by any craft of any enemies. Christian Europe has subdued barbarous nations and changed them from a savage to a civilized condition, from superstition to true worship. It victoriously rolled back the tide of Mohammedan conquest, retained the headship of civilization, stood forth in the front rank as the leader and teacher of all in every branch of national culture, bestowed on the world the gift of true and many-sided liberty, and most wisely founded very numerous institutions for the solace of human suffering. And if we inquire how it was able to bring about so altered a condition of things, the answer is beyond all question, in large measure through religion, under whose auspices so many great undertakings were set on foot, through whose aid they were brought to completion. And so I believe that we are the 500 in the hills of northern Spain, not just here, but people of Acadiana. They have to be awakened through education to this memory. It requires a classical education of Greek and Roman culture, the foundation of our culture, the great books. These are the things that no other schools except the homeschoolers and the independent Catholic schools are capable of passing on. And we have to be a part of that. We have to learn our faith, we have to learn our history, and be able to infuse into young people a zeal for this reconquest. Jesus Christ, God's word is not going to return to him void. It will achieve. The question is, are we going to be a part of it? I said that was last, but another day I'll come back and I'll talk about the role of Our Lady of Guadalupe and Our Lady of Fatima, who sort of bracket the modern world and bracket the history of the United States and Louisiana. And I say that because we don't say, okay, what do we want to do? Well, we want to do what heaven wants us to do. Heaven's going to accomplish it. We want to be a part of that, not for our glory. We may never be known. Mary never planned on being known, and yet she's the most famous woman in the world. We want the privilege of participating just for love, following him into battle, and just being a part for the sake of being a part of it, for the joy of serving so great a Lord and Lady.